Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the EEA grants closing event of our mobile station. Today marks 42 months since we began this project, which was originally 36, but then we had an extension of 6 months because we got plagued by just about everything you can imagine. First, we had a pandemic. Then we had Putin losing his mind and invading Ukraine, which basically drove prices through the roof on just about everything. Our wonderful partners, DKM, also had some difficulties of their own, and they had to pull out, but they did continue right up to the end to assist us in this process. So it's been a long, long journey, but we're very, very close to the end. Today marks the official closing of this project. And we will be on the road with this amazing transport unit within a couple of weeks. So let me start by sharing with you the background of these transport units. Let me mute some. There's a microphone there making some noise. I'm just going to... Okay. There we go. Okay, so basically, the Flying Sharks began back in 2006. This was our very first order, a small devil ray, the mobular that we moved from Olhão in the south of Portugal to Valencia. Of course, we were absolutely paranoid. This was invoice number 1 for Flying Sharks. We were terrified that something would go wrong. So we did many things to ensure that everything went smoothly. For example, we used these massive tanks, which are 2.4 meters wide, but we were afraid that the rays' cephalic lobes, you know how modular rays have 2 fins on their head. We were afraid that the filtration would get caught there and the ray would be basically scared. So we came up with a very clever system where all the filtration was in a second tank so that the ray could swim unharmed in the main tank, which they had just water. And we felt that it was a very smart system. All of the filtration was in a second tank without the ray, and everything basically went really, really well. In fact, this system was so cool that IATA, the International Association of Air Transport, basically copied our system and put it in their manual and never gave us credit. I'm not going to say a bad word, but anyway, they put it on their manual, and it doesn't actually mention Flying Sharks in there, which I think is disgraceful. Anyway, so that didn't make us very happy when they did that. Anyway, moving on, this is another order that we had, moving 4 sunfish, mola mola, to the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta. At this point, we had 1 mola mola in each tank. This picture was taken at JFK Airport in New York. So we flew DHL from Lisbon to Vitoria, Spain, then Brussels, then JFK. And then we moved on to that DC-4 that you see in the back there. That's a 1948 airplane with no seats. We all basically stood around chatting. We took off holding on to a big rail. We landed holding on to a big rail. This is basically the way things were done back in those days. But every animal arrived there alive and well. 2010, we received our biggest order ever, 3,000 something fish that were collected in Peniche, in the Algarve, in the Western Shore, also in the Azores and Madeira. And that basically made us fill 2 big planes. That's the one plane you see here in the foreground and the one you see right off to the left. 2 big planes completely packed with 42 tanks of live fish. Most of them, or 2/3 of those fish, actually came from the Azores. They were stored, they were kept in shipping containers for about 3 months. Very difficult conditions. The guys would use their own cars for light at night, extremely difficult conditions. And then they were shipped by boat from the Azores to Lisbon, and everything got consolidated into Olhão. And finally, there were eight semi-trucks pulling over to the airport on the night of 13th December 2010 offloading 44 tanks with 3,100 fish. Now, one very important aspect of this transport is that we started using protein skimmers, which now is basically something that we absolutely would not be able to do any transport without protein skimmers. We find them absolutely invaluable for any transport. Needless to say that oxygen and pH were monitored throughout the whole process. Amquel was used to control ammonia, to detoxify ammonia. pH buffers were also used. Hey, let me just say hi to Suzanne Gendron. I see you just joined us from Hong Kong, right? Suzanne, keep your eye on the road. Don't worry about it. I see you're driving. Don't worry about it. But thank you so much for joining us. Okay. I think you're muted, but don't worry about it. I just wanted to say hi. Please.
Hello.
Hey, okay. Thank you so much for joining us from all the way in Hong Kong. That's really cool. Anyway.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more. I'll mute again so you don't hear.
No problem. No problem at all. Thank you so much. Okay, so this was our biggest transport ever, 3,100 fish. Let me just brag for a little bit and say that we had 3 losses. 3. So 3 fish died out of 3,100. So that's 99.9% survivorship, something that we're really proud of. Now, this opened up a new era for us. And for example, we started getting more and more requests just to move fish. For example, our friends from Ecomar, from the University of Aveiro, asked us to move some 1,200 salmon smolt from Norway to Aveiro. And then we did it again from Ireland to Aveiro. We actually did the smoltification in transit. And what that means is that they started at 0 salinity, and we actually added salt throughout the transport to increase salinity. Pretty much the same setup that you saw on those planes, you know, the protein skimmers, our big 2.4 meter wide tanks. And one aspect that we're quite proud of now is that we don't actually correct our water quality. We use a preventive method. So we add sodium carb and sodium bicarbonate before water deteriorates. And what that allows is for that beautiful flat line of pH that you see in those 2 charts, where we were able to keep a pH of 7.77 absolutely flat in the second half of the shipment, because it takes us a while, of course, to correct, to understand exactly what the dose needs to be used, because this changes with the bioload, with the species, it changes with everything. But once we get that sweet spot dose just right, you basically have a flat line throughout the year. So this was about the time that we started thinking about this massive container that we thought was basically going to change things forever. We thought, you know, we've been moving these fish for a long time. How about we build ourselves the best fish moving transport unit that this planet has ever seen? And our friend Rui Guedes designed it initially on Google SketchUp. State-of-the-art filtration, protein skimming, activated carbon, mechanical filtration, gravitational filtration, and quite a few other things that I will lay out. So we started calling it a transport unit, but pretty soon we started calling it a mobile holding station, because this thing isn't just for moving fish. We can actually drive it to Italy, to the United States. If we take a ship, of course, we can drive to Turkey, and we can set up this unit there and basically be there for months, collecting fish and just keeping them for months and months and months. So this is basically like our holding station in Peniche, west of Portugal, or in the Azores, on wheels. So we're basically able to move our holding station anywhere in the world and then work there. So this thing, of course, is temperature controlled. We can use it on road and sea. It's too large for an airplane, of course. But we can get input 110 volts, which is what you have in America, 230 here in Europe, 380, which is what you get when you move it by sea. So it's basically prepared for all of this. We have around 15 cubic meters, which is more or less what we had in our previous setup with those blue tanks. Very advanced life support systems. and of course, remote probes that allow us to drive behind this container, you know, and we have our cell phones in our hands, and we can actually look on the phone and see what the pH is like, and what the ammonia and temperature and all of that is like remotely. And obviously a coffee machine, because you can't move all these fish around the world without drinking lots of coffee and Red Bull, you know, when I should totally get some discount next time I buy 100 cans of Red Bull from those guys. Anyway, so this was our brilliant plan. And so then, of course, okay, this is going to cost a freaking fortune. How the hell are we going to get money for this thing? And that's when we heard about the EEA grants. Now, this is a cool agency that's basically money from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. These countries had the extremely bright idea of, okay, let's not be part of the European Union, because obviously I can totally understand that Iceland does not want the Portuguese, the Spaniards, the French depleting the hell out of their fish stocks, which is what for sure would happen. We've seen the history. But they want to get the benefits of being in the European Union. So they very smartly set up this program where they help the more unprivileged countries in the European Union with some money so that they can raise to the level of the other countries. Now, luckily for us, Portugal, we're very poor, so we can use that money. If we were German, we wouldn't get a cent. But because we are Portuguese, we qualify for this EEA grants aid. So we basically started a submission process, which was extremely long, lots and lots of paperwork. But hey, it's a €500,000 grant, so there is, of course, a lot of paperwork. Now, the thing about Flying Sharks is that we have an amazing team, but all of this stuff is basically concentrated on yours truly. So I'm Flying Sharks secretary, founder, and CEO. So I took care of all of this stuff. I was losing my mind for a couple of weeks. But we submitted all of these hundreds and hundreds of documents, and we got it approved, which was very, very cool. And it made us very, very proud. So on October 2020, we received notice that our project had been approved. We were absolutely ecstatic. So basically, we started working. Now, the very first thing we had to do was choosing the right container. So we went to our friends in Comicont. I'm just going to talk over this sound. This is basically us in near Lisbon selecting the absolute best container. You can see my son there in the middle driving the big forklift. Because we went to this container place a bunch of times. Okay, I'm just going to go out of that slide because it's very noisy. But basically, it took us quite a few years, believe it or not, to select the right container, because we couldn't have one that had rust on the bottom. We wanted to make sure that the cooling unit, which you see there on the left, was in absolute pristine condition. And of course, that the interior was also in very good condition, no rust. And of course, we wanted to buy a used container, because a new container costs like €50,000. But a used container can go as low as 10. We ended up reaching a compromise. We bought a €14,000 container, which is basically like new. So after all those trips to the container place, I feel like we did a really good deal. Anyway, so then, of course, you have to worry about all the legal aspects. This container needs to be certified. It needs to be fully legal. It needs to have all the paperwork in order, and it does. And then we need to make it pretty. Have our nice logo and the EEA grants logo, and there it is being painted and just looking all shiny and new and amazing. And there it is parked at the DKM installation. Our friends, so you can see Nuno Machado. There is one of our friends listening to the talk, one of our partners. This is in Coimbra. One of the best things about the meetings with DKM is we would always go for leitão. That's a suckling pig, which is a delicious thing to have if you ever come to Portugal. Please don't miss out. I hope there's no vegetarians listening to this. They will be very mad at me. But anyway, it is a wonderful thing to have. Okay, so that's the container being offloaded at the DKM site. And I'll just move forward because it's very noisy. So these are some of our amazing trips to DKM. There on the right, you'll see Rui Guedes. Rui Guedes really is the brain behind all of this thing. I'm just the guy who takes photos and does the PowerPoint presentations. Nuno Machado, one of our friends there, and next to, between me and Nuno Machado, Antonio Pires, young engineer that's been helping us from day one. He's actually moved on to another project, but Antonio is so good that we actually keep him on this project, and we pay him so that he can still help us. And this guy has basically solved every problem you can think of. So Antonio basically started by converting the project from the Google SketchUp drawings that Rui had made onto an actual professional software. I believe it's not the AutoCAD. It's something that's even more. I think it's Illustrator. No, you're right there. What's the software that Antonio uses?
It's Inventor.
Inventor, exactly.
Inventor.
So
it's
exactly.
Yeah, because AutoCAD only permits to do 2 dimensions drawings.
There you go.
Inventor make the 3 dimension and convert in drawings for the fabrication in 2 dimensions.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. So this is the kind of stuff that NASA uses. It's super amazing, like very professional software. And you have to think of everything. So it's not just drawing and putting the tanks inside the container. You actually have to run tests like torsion, because you think that this thing is going to be on a boat. It's going to be on a truck. So the whole thing is going to rotate and get squished around. So we have to run tests on that, which you can do on that software. So I'm not going to bore you with all the technical details, but let me just say that every single detail was thought of for this project. For example, we're going to have air, or we do have air and oxygen in this project, and there's a very specific line that's going to feed air and oxygen to all of the tanks. If anything fails, there's a lot of backup and a lot of contingency. If anything fails, there's a separate oxygen tank that basically feeds all of the tanks in case the main line fails. So all of that was basically thought of. So there's oxygen and air. And then there's, again, oxygen cylinders that are going to feed each individual tank, and an emergency oxygen feed that's going to feed everything in case everything else fails. This is the hydraulics, basically. I don't want to bore you with all the details. That handwriting there is very small. I just want to give you a general idea that basically we're going to have gravitational filtration for the big stuff, for the big solids in suspension. And from there, it's basically the water is going to go to this pressurized bag that we bought from our German friends in Sagermack, basically the best filters in the world. And then it's going to go to an activated carbon filter, where the even finer particles are going to get filtrated. And then, of course, there's going to be ultraviolet to prevent bacterial growth throughout the transport. Bear in mind that it's not just transports. We can have the station stopped in a place working for, let's say, months and months. So avoiding bacterial growth is extremely important. And these ultra UVs are very, very, very accurate. And finally, protein skimmers, which of course we wouldn't even dream of doing anything like this without protein skimmers, which is really the backbone of our filtration these days. All of that, we're basically using Abyss pumps, something that I like to announce because our friend Alex has bent over backwards to provide the absolute best pumps that we could. And I'm also hoping to get a free gin and tonic next time I see Alex at a conference out of this slide right here. Anyway, the electrical board is insane. I mean, this is a very, very simple explanation of the electrical board, which actually Nuno's brother, João Machado, has designed, and he's done an amazing job. Basically, we're going to have input and external power supply of multiple different types of voltages, depending on what the country that we're at, or depending on, for example, if we're on a ship. Then there's going to be a power generator in case power fails. A generator automatically starts. There's going to be a main electrical board. And then, of course, filtration pumps, the UV, the air pumps, everything is going to feed off this electrical board. And of course, there's going to be a UPS in case everything fails. A UPS will basically keep things running. So everything was, thought of. Finally, the power generator, of course, you can't have a generator just throwing fumes inside the container. So there's an exhaust that comes outside, and it's mounted actually on the door that swings out. There's a housing purposely built to, in case the generator explodes, you don't want that thing to, to make the whole thing explode up in the air. So it's basically contained inside an especially built housing that not only insulates from sound, from temperature, from vibration, but also all of the exhaust fumes come outside. So basically, everything is mounted on the container door. There's an exhaust leading outside. Obviously, there needs to be an intake for air to go inside the generator so it can work properly, and the air, again, coming out outside. And let me just look behind you real quick. And of course, like I was saying, the firewall sound and temperature insulation. Now, one of the coolest things about this container or these tanks is that the way the water circulation is designed was thought of considering multiple types of species that we're going to have. So water is going to go out through the perforated plates that are on the outside, and it's going to go in. But it's done in a way that we can shift these vertical plates. For example, if we're moving scomber, that's mackerel, it's a very pelagic fish, we want water to be collected all over the water column. But if we're moving dazzled, that's a ray, they have a lot of mucus and they're mostly going to be along the bottom. We want most of the water to be collected along the bottom of the tank. So all of these details were thought of to ensure that we get absolute optimal filtration depending on the species that we're using on each tank. So back with all of those delays, first it was the pandemic, then it was the invasion of Ukraine. All of these things drove prices really high. It drove shortages of materials. So there were a lot of delays. And it wasn't really until May 2023 that we could actually start building this thing. And I'll show you a couple of pictures of all of these super cool details. So we have 3 single tanks, and the last tank that you see there on the right is a double tank. This thing is basically going to be able to move the Loch Ness Monster if we want to. If we want to move really big sharks, that's the tank that we're going to use. Oxygen is going to be mounted on the left under the first tank. Again, also under a special housing that in case one of the oxygen cylinders blows up, it's not going to kill everyone and every fish. It's just going to be contained inside this stainless steel housing that's been designed by, oxygen people who know what they're doing. These are the very first materials that arrived at DKM. That's our friend Rui looking at the very first design of the tank. And now you'll see in the pictures, it's come along very, very nicely. So this gave us a chance to have another of our wonderful late down sucking pig lunches. And there's again, I can't give enough praise to Rui, who really is the brain behind all of this. And this guy here in the front in glasses, who basically just shows up for the PowerPoint and the drinks, of course, and the late down. So this is an actual tank in Vintiplast, one of our partners in Cantanhede, very close to Coimbra. And this is the very first tank completely done. Basically, this is ready to go inside the container. Once we have the big tank, which I'll show you in a couple of slides, we'll start putting everything inside the container and connecting the electrical board to everything. But you can see the original design, the activated carbon filter, the gravity well there on the right, the protein skimmer, the ultraviolet light, which you see on the bottom, horizontal, and of course, the pressurized sandbags. Everything as designed is actually become a reality, which is really, really cool. Now, these clamps that you see there around, this is just a small example of things you have to think of. So you can't just buy clamps and clamp the lid on top of the tank. There's a lot of engineering and a lot of tests that have to be done to ensure that the pressure that you're going to apply to those clamps is basically going to seal the tank, because the water level is actually going to go all the way up to this well. So we have to make absolutely sure that there's not one drop can come out of this well. This is the bottom of the last tank, the double one that I told you. It's now being made in Vintiplast in Cantanhede. Look how amazing and how huge that thing is. A lot of reinforcement, of course. And this is just a close-up of the clamps that I was telling you before. And notice how the filtration, we were very careful to avoid sharp turns. You know, there's nothing worse for hydraulics than to have like a 90-degree elbow. So there was a lot of design and a lot of thought to make sure that the water will be able to circulate as freely as possible. So a lot of hours went into designing all of this. So this is an impressive Excel sheet. This is our expenditure. The beginning of this year alone, we're up to 189,000 euros. So this is all money that should have been spread all over 3 years. But with all of those things that I told you, first the pandemic, then it was the Ukraine, then our partner DKM went bankrupt, but they're still, you know, pulling their weight. They're still working with us. All of these things basically had us push all of our main expenditure to the very last bit of the project. But we did. We actually spent all this money from January until now. And we're basically ready to throw everything inside that container. And we actually took the opportunity a year and a half ago. We actually had the transport from the UK to France, double transport. So we went to the UK and France, and then back to the UK and France. And we actually had the container itself certified. So we're now one of the very few companies in Europe that are fully certified for moving fish to and from the UK, which is something that we're quite proud of. And with that, I will finally shut up. I will share our contacts with us. And thank you so much for being here. And if you guys have any questions, by all means, I'm all yours. Feel free to ask any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, João. Wonderful.
Excellent.
Very good.
I'm
Thank you.
excited to see on site the project.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we're gonna, I believe by midsummer this year, by the middle of summer, we're gonna have the container in Peniche. And of course, we're gonna have another event, and we're gonna have some champagne and maybe some leitão and maybe some croquetes. And we're gonna have basically everybody visiting the container and see how it's happening. But it's been a long process, but it's finally very, very close to the end. So yeah, we're very proud of you know, all the obstacles we've had, but it's finally very, very close.
And we'll try to be there.
Rock and roll. Cool. Okay.
Okay.
Any more questions? Suzanne, again, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Hong Kong. This is really cool. Yeah, I've never had anyone join us from that far. But don't worry about it. I know you're driving, so pay attention, please. Just wanted to say thank you. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Okay.
And
Thank you, João.
Very good.
keep an eye for news on social media. And as soon as this thing is out the door, you're going to learn about it on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
On the project.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.